See, this is why I can't take anybody seriously when they try to talk about intelligence and spies, because it's just nasty. You know, there used to be a Supreme Court justice, and he was in intelligence. He was in burger court, and then when you see what he did, it's terrifying. That's what it said in the book. You're saying it's a lie? No, you're not. What you are saying is that you don't know what to do because we're bankrupted. We have 800 years of default we have to cover. And so the question is, well, then who would be our peer group? They might have some experience in what it means to try to administer a system of jurisprudence when we're completely fucking bankrupt. Not only are we completely fucking bankrupt, we are bankrupt to a time before our creditors had the credit to give us for our startup. I mean, that's the situation we're in right now, right? And so the thing is that back in the day, they were dealing with leverage we don't like to talk about. That's why you don't want to teach about the Holocaust. You sure as fuck didn't want to teach about the Holocaust, because then you were going to teach about all the other things before that. It wasn't just about culture and architecture and music and dancing and all the great food, right? That's kind of where we are right now. So I have to look something up right quick. I'll get back to you in a second. Last year, a series of very unfortunate events occurred in concurrence with my efforts to seek gainful employment as an inspector of industrial materials, or rather, as somebody that would have been doing quality assurance on an assembly line for component materials in the construction of facilities, right? Interior. And so this is the downgrade, so to speak, that has resulted since I attempted first in 2017 to receive certification in non-destructive testing with the anticipation that after a short period of time that should have been over with before, in beginning of fiscal year 2017 into 18, 2018 fiscal year, that what would have been happening, or 2017 fiscal year, what would have been happening is that I would have finished my training, and then I would have gotten some sort of role under supervision. And then I would have spent 2 years working with a particular company in order to get the actual on-the-job training and experience I needed, including and having by the end of that 2 years of authentic work experience that had been verified, which also would have had to have included me being registered with certain standards bodies and demonstrating a certain level of proficiency, being able to pass background checks, which may entail some form of physical and or even a urine test, make sure that I'm not using any intoxicants while I'm on the job, and then ensuring I lived a lifestyle that precluded me from getting in any altercations with law enforcement so that I didn't have that, potentially sullying my professional credentials. And it also would have required me to have been able to register with and obtain a transportation workers identification credential card, which I understand for the kind of facilities that I was anticipating, at least if nothing else, I would be qualified at some point in time in the future to be able to access and have to address matters in relation to. I would necessarily have to have. So those things cost money, but the understanding is I would be working, be making a wage commensurate enough to be able to invest in my own education. And this would have been a successful fulfillment and perhaps even value added, hopefully considerably value added contribution to the state of Texas and the role the state of Texas had with the federal government through the workforce program, including federal appropriations that are given to states like the state of Texas so that they can engage in supporting grants to people for their workforce training. Am I correct? Okay. So what that means is by the time that there was any indication that there might be alerts concerning COVID-19, I would have already had 2 years practical experience on the job under official supervision. And then by that time, I would have already been in a position before the beginning of, before September 1st of 2019 to have received certification confirming my relationship or whatever would have been the necessary proprietary sort of certification that I would have needed to acquire in order to confirm my relationship and whatever the terms were with either that particular entity or perhaps as some sort of contractor with a particular kind of priority in consideration of the work relationship we had after those 2 years, right? But that's not what happened, is it? There's a lot of people that didn't happen to. And by the time 2020 came around, well, the standards had changed, right? Now, the thing is, my original investment in education was provided by the Department of Defense through the Army in 1994. And according to what I understand in the certification process for the technologies I studied and was certified in via a private institution funded by a workforce grant, that acknowledged that those certifications were appropriate for up to and including construction of defense articles, let's put it that way, as well as inspection of facilities that would require some sort of national security background check in order to be able to do safely, effectively, and at the appropriate level, right? According to them, you need to be recertified every 5 years, at least. Now, see, the thing is, what was underwriting those certifications was at that level. But you continue to try to bitch it down every year. And now I'm at a point where I am supposed to accept, knowing that my identification documents, primary source identification documents, have been compromised intentionally in order to try to create me as some sort of black market product to be leveraged. And while I fit a specific kind of demographic based upon my skill level and capabilities, that is actually a minority demographic, by the way. Well, that's not what is marketable for my demographic, right? And what you want is to be able to recalibrate the leverageability of that skill set in order to, I guess if you're talking about it from a civil rights perspective, be able to give some sort of affirmative action measures to people that otherwise wouldn't have access. But we're talking about people that have been strategically and intentionally imported to the country in order to sabotage the economy and polity we have now, specifically and exclusively for demographic reasons. And that only makes sense if you're honest about the role of the inspector when it comes to inspecting facilities connected to manufacture, distribution, and or potential disposal of chemical or biological weapons. And see, the thing is, what's underwriting that education is absolutely at that level, and a refusal to address it at that level defaults and defaults and defaults and defaults, right? Now, I know think that there's 800 years of karma somebody else is responsible for contributing to that, unless somebody thought that their weapons paradigm was entitled to try to put an illegal lien on 800 years worth of credit of somebody else's in their construction. Is that what we're talking about right now? I'm looking at an article. During the last time I tried to get a job, it was at a ceramics factory that was headquartered in Mexico. Now, I found them to make a very high quality product, to be honest with you. I was very much looking forward to working there. There were some things about, shall we say, source origin of some of their equipment that, in the context of other things that were ongoing, were questionable. It would have behooved somebody to have done some sort of on-site inspection and then cross-reference it with any audits, just to make sure. Because, and especially because of some of the behavior that was experienced on the job that compelled me to have to leave. But around that time, a variety of other things were going on, including this announcement right here that said, the original announcement was that on August 20th of 2020, a young man who was identified as a CBRN specialist from Fort Hood had gone missing. He'd been engaged in some sort of physical exercise, and somebody who drove him back to where he resided dropped him off, and then he wasn't seen again. Now, I tried a couple of times to check up on this story throughout the last year. I was specifically concerned because of the date and its proximity to the situation regarding the explosion in Beirut. But there had also been the situation concerning a woman who worked at Fort Hood, who had been been represented in the media, had been attacked, beaten, and had been murdered, and the controversy surrounding that. Now, since then, there has been a report that has been released concerning sexual harassment in the Army, and as I understand it, the first report was that 7 people that were in a command position at Fort Hood directly were relieved of their duty. What their actual status is now, I cannot say, I do not know. And there were other people within that command that were put into a situation of having to deal with the ramifications, including potentially removal from post and or maybe some sort of reassignment. I am hoping we're not talking about a Catholic Church type of scenario. scenario where they just get redeployed somewhere else. We have to deal with these situations later on because that specific event was a targeted hit that was not called just on base, is what I'm saying, right? And it's the same thing with Sergeant Elder Fernandez, 23, a U.S. Army soldier stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. Now, this article I'm seeing right now in the same publication, and I remember seeing this the publication with the first article last year. That's why I'm going back to it as a source at the time. It says that his body ended up being found. It says it was found on Tuesday night, which would have been August 26, 2020. And they're talking about some of the incidents that happened. But the headline says that he was found hanging near a tree near the tracks. This is what it said. Responding police found Fernandez's body hanging from a tree near the tracks. You mean the train tracks? I see. Then it says here, information about his unit. Now, see, this is disturbing to me because, first of all, this specific article, again, like every article I found referencing this young man or discussing this young man, ended with Miss Guillen, right? Vanessa Guillen, specialist Vanessa Guillen, and what happened to her, which is a tragedy. But this is obvious, right? And so there was a 6-day period between when it was first reported and it was then reported that his body had been found, which means for 6 days, presumably, there was an understanding he was missing, and there was an alert put out to identify him. And then 6 days later, his body was found. How long had he been dead when he'd been found? Was he kidnapped? And see, this is very important because of the implications, and because if I'm not mistaken, it's going to make a big difference. If you value his life beginning on August 20th versus August 26th, right? It's a year and a day after August 20th. It's August 21st. So more than that, I'm going to say one more thing here. August 21st, right here. It says, there's something here. Again, they're talking about Miss Guillen. It's the same source here. Then they go into another thing here, Mr. So the point of the matter is, this article has been changed, I believe, but it may not have been. I'll have to check with the other one. The point of the matter is, are you intending to have a sort of debriefing? Is this one of those debriefings? Is this one of those after-action reports? Because, you know, if there's a default, and that means that the first lien is to be put on someone, who would you think it would be put on? Let's see, I'm pretty certain this is a story more comprehensive than what has been alleged. I would be very appreciative if somebody would provide me with any relevant case materials in U.S. versus Lovejoy. If I'm not mistaken, it is from 1972. I did find it before, and I did review it in a very concise form, and understand it has been referenced in other cases. But I want the original case. I want the one you want on the record as your reference point specifically for that. I consider it to be evidence directly connected to the murder of the CBRN specialist. And you have plenty of time. Today is July 19, 2021. It's 1:24 p.m. Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied? Because if you had to meet certain benchmarks in order to prove certain points, I believe you just did.